Good morning. Thank you very much for having me here. So, as I was already introduced, I'm the head of sector at the European Commission for the unit that is in the unit that's responsible for EIDAS. And my sector in particularly works on the implementation of the technical framework for the EID. So I realize I might be the only person in the room who is not a security or certification expert. Instead, what I will do is to give you a broader overview of what we actually do in the Commission, the different strands of work that we are working on now in order to bring the European Digital Identity Wallet to life. So the European digital identity, of course, is based on the legislative proposal that we put forward in June of 2021. During the time that we worked on the evaluation of the existing EIDAS regulation and then the impact assessment for the revision of EIDAS, COVID happened. And that changed a little bit the opportunities that we had to actually change the regulation and to improve it substantially. So because with the push for further digitalization, of course, digital identity and access to digital services became a central enabler for not only for everyday life, but also for citizens to be able to exercise their right of freedom and movement also in the digital world. Now, so we reflected a little bit of the most important things that we wanted for the European digital identity and came up with 3 cornerstones. The first one of them would be that all European citizens and businesses should have access to a digital identity. So we put in the legislation an obligation for member states to actually provide that to those who want to use it, because the usage, of course, remains voluntary. The second cornerstone was that it should be accepted everywhere, not only for accessing public services, but also for many of the private services that require us to authenticate. And another important thing was, of course, that it should not only work at national level, but you should be able to use it throughout the Union. And the third cornerstone was that it has to be secure, it has to be centered around privacy and give the citizens control of the data that they want to share. So, based around these cornerstones, the Commission put forward its proposal for amending the EIDAS regulation by establishing a framework for a European digital identity. So at the moment, we have basically 4 main work strands that we are focusing on in the Commission, in the unit. And the first one is the legislative negotiations of the proposal between Council and the Parliament. At the same time as the proposal for the legislation was adopted by the Commission, we also adopted a recommendation that would support the implementation of the wallet. And this recommendation calls on member states to work together to identify the toolbox, which should contain the architecture and reference framework, the standards and technical specifications, as well as guidelines and best practices for implementation of the wallet. In addition to that, we also launched last year in February a call for proposals calling for large-scale pilots to be funded by the Commission under the Digital Europe program. These projects will pilot use cases for the wallet in the areas of, for example, mobile driving license, e-payments, e-health, etc. And then finally, we have the procurement of reference implementation of the wallet that we also launched last year. So this reference application will be used for, it will be built on the ARF, and it will be used for the pilot projects to pilot the wallet. And so where are we at the moment? So it has passed almost 2 years since the legislative proposal was adopted by the Commission. And so the main milestones that we have reached so far is that the legal proposal is currently under negotiation by the Council and the Parliament. So officially the negotiations kicked off on the 21st of March of this year. It is very intense, but it is going forward, and it is our hope, but of course you never know how these things go, but it is our hope that the negotiations will conclude and that the regulation will be adopted within this year. With regards to the technical specifications of the wallet and the toolbox process, we published the first version of the Architecture and Reference Framework, or the ARF as we call it, in February this year. So this Architecture and Reference Framework is not complete, and it needs further work, and it needs revision and updates. So in fact, what is not mentioned here is that a new version of the Architecture and Reference Framework was adopted by the EADAS expert group last week. And I think it is published as of today, or possibly yesterday. We will continue to add on to the Architecture and Reference Framework with new updates in hopefully short cycles, so that we, before the end of the year, can have a complete set of technical specifications for the wallet. With regards to the development of the reference implementation of the wallet, we awarded a framework contract in December of last year, so there the developments have started. We are looking forward to a first release of a wallet in May or June of this year, with a new update later on in the summer in August, and another update towards the end of the year. So the specific contract that has been awarded at this point is for 1 year only, and that's why we only have 1 year in this timeline. But of course, there will be further work going on after that. So the successive updates of this reference implementation will be informed by the updates of the ARF and also by the needs and requirements of the large-scale pilots. So the status currently of the large-scale pilot projects is that some of them are still pending the signature. Nevertheless, they officially started on the 1st of April this year. So they have started to work a little bit, and they will be running for 2 years. And I will come back a little bit to what it is that they will pilot a little bit later. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we envision the wallet to be able to be recognized both by private and public service providers for all transactions that require authentication. And the types of examples of the types of usage that the wallet should support include allowing users to prove who they are when accessing public services, or for example, if they want to open a bank account, which is a private service that requires identification. It should allow users to control their personal data when logging into social platforms or social media or platforms. But it should also allow users to prove their right to drive by showing a valid driver's license from the wallet, to obtain e-prescription, a medical prescription, and to use it at the pharmacy, and to demonstrate their social security rights. And the wallet should also be able to store and present simple loyalty cards, membership cards, and event tickets, etc. And of course, to sign contracts and to show consent in different settings and authorize payments. So it's quite a versatile wallet that we have in mind. So how to implement the wallet? The functionalities of the wallet is settled in or established in the architecture and reference framework that sets the foundation for the wallet. The ARF is a very collaborative document that we developed together with member states in the EIDAS expert group. And the fact that the first version of it was published in February of this year shows that there was consensus among member states what the basic architecture of the wallet should do and look like. As I said, it's not complete, but that version at least allowed for us to kick off the work on the development of the reference implementation of the wallet. So one of the challenges we're facing with developing the architecture and reference framework, of course, is that it's being done in parallel with the legislative negotiations, which means that it is a little bit a moving target. And also there is, of course, a risk that whatever is done in the expert group with the work on the architecture and reference framework is that it might interfere with the legislative negotiations, which we have to avoid. And therefore, whatever is in the ARF is based on the Commission's original proposal. So once the negotiations have been concluded, we will need to adjust and update the ARF again to reflect the outcome of the negotiations and the agreement between Council and Parliament. As you might know, perhaps some of you already, is that apart from publishing the architecture and reference on the normal Commission website, etc., we have also put it on GitHub and would very much appreciate any comments and input that you would like to give on it. So I will provide the link to that afterwards, but perhaps you already have it, many of you. Now, so this slide is a high-level and basic representation of what the wallet should contain and how it will function. So here on the right-hand side, we have the core of the wallet, which is the person identification data, which includes the attributes that will allow the user to identify themselves. So it's family name, first name, date of birth, etc. In addition to the identification data, we also have the qualified and non-qualified electronic attestations of attributes that allows you to show, for example, a university diploma or professional qualifications, a driving license, etc. So these will be issued to the wallet by qualified and non-qualified trust service providers. And then the user should be able to present all this data and information to relying parties or service providers within a trusted framework using either a remote scenario or proximity flow. So looking a little bit more in detail at what was agreed with member states in the first version of the ARF, we agreed on establishing the standards and protocols to be used for issuing and presenting person identification data and qualified and non-qualified electronic attestations of attributes. So for person identification data, we actually did not say how member states have to issue it. The only requirement that we set is that it has to be issued in such a way that it can be presented both in accordance with the data models of ISO 18013-5 and W3C verifiable credentials. So it has to be in both formats. For the electronic attestations of attributes, we have the same standards there, but it can be either or depending on the requirements of the specific use case that the electronic attestation of attributes will represent. So in addition to that, it was established that it should be presented using both qualified attestations of attributes and PID using OpenID for verifiable presentation and CEOP for the remote flow and ISO 18013-5 for the proximity flows. In the first update of the ARF, which was adopted last week, we have added on blueprints for the use cases, service blueprints for the use cases on online identification, authentication, and on the mobile driving license. And work is already ongoing for the next update. So for this slide, I think it's the topic of this seminar very much. So I will not say so much about it because you are the experts and this is what you will discuss. But one of the most important challenges that we're facing is, of course, where to store the crypto material of the wallet. And for us, the preference would be, of course, if it can be stored in the eSIM or in a secure element. But there are many challenges around it. Another challenge that we are facing is the trust model and the trust framework. So in the interest of reducing the complexity of the wallet, of course, it would be preferable to have fewer trust models in the wallet. But it might be that certain use cases requires their own trust framework, which will then add more complexity to the wallet. Standardization of qualified electronic attestation of attributes at EU level and beyond. So Benoit, what you mentioned about the complexity of the legislative landscape here is even more because many of the use cases that we see for the wallet are developed in sectoral legislation that also needs to be taken into account, like the legislation for the mobile driving license, for example. And even more difficult, I would say, would be in those areas where there is no legislation. How then do you ensure harmonization of those use cases? That's also a challenge that we face. And I think the fourth point here also points to what you brought up in your presentation, Benoit. It's the user experience and broad adoption at citizen level. And that, of course, has to be then compatible also with high security and privacy. Okay, so to come back a little bit to the reference implementation of the wallet. So the scope is here to build a reference technical infrastructure to support interoperability and implementation of the wallet and its ecosystem. It is meant to support member states and other stakeholders in developing and implementing and scaling up the framework. And this reference implementation will also be used by the large-scale pilots to enable them to test their use cases. So I already mentioned before here the different rollouts of the wallet. It starts with a simple wallet that can support authentication in Q2 of 23. Then it's built on with identification and the mobile driving license in the next release in August, and then subsequent releases based on the updated ARF and feedbacks from the pilots. And the outcome that we're looking for is an open source reference wallet application and libraries that have been tested and certified and ready to be used by member states. So I would like to show you a little bit of the pilots that are going to be tested by the wallet. So as I mentioned, the large-scale pilot started on the 1st of April. We are currently in the process of concluding the grant agreements. There are 4 projects that have been selected for funding. And between the 4 projects, there are more than 100 public authorities participating and almost 200 private entities. The pilots cover 25 member states, plus Iceland, plus Norway, and plus Ukraine. They will be running for 2 years, and the EU provides funding for up to 50% of the piloting costs for a total EU funding of 46 million euros. And these are, I think, most of the use cases that will be tested by those pilots. So it's how to store and present the mobile driving license, to present it both online and in a proximity use case where you're, for example, stopped by the police at a roadside check. In the area of banking or payments, it will be for opening bank accounts to verify your identity and perform the know your customer functions. There will be a use case on SIM registration and contract registration and activation processes. E-signatures, of course, how to digitally sign contracts online, how to access digital public services. There will be a use case on e-prescription and how to authorize payments using the wallet. A use case on traveling, which contains both digital travel credentials, but also how to book a trip or a hotel using the wallet. Another use case will look at organizational digital identity, so how a person can act on behalf of an organization doing business to business or business to government interactions. It will contain a use case on proving your health, social insurance, social security status, so the European health insurance card, but also other social security documents that are needed for posted workers, for example. And we also have a use case on educational and professional qualifications, so that you can store and present your university diploma and, for example, a medical license, a license to perform, to act as a medical doctor, etc. So we have a large variety of use cases to be tested by the wallet. And that was it from me. I think it was a broad but hopefully good overview of what it is that we're working on. It's a lot more than just the security, even though that's very, very important. It's one of the core things of the wallet. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening, and I wish you a good rest of the conference.